You are no match for our Kung Fu.
I agree, but this is.
Power. Every bad guy in movies wants that. But this one needs it. Not for wealth, not for glory, but because this is the only way he knows. And this insatiable thirst has turned him into pure chaos. His tendency for destruction consumes everything it touches. I am talking about Lord Shen, one of the best villains DreamWorks has ever created, and certainly the most popular bad guy in the Kung Fu Panda universe. A peacock who's evil throughout, from his eyes down to his claws. Everything about this guy exudes menace. Even when he has an opportunity to be better, which he has had several of, he refuses. Because, for Lord Shen, evil isn't only a choice, it's his purpose.
Find more metal! China will be mine.
There's a certain unpredictability about him that keeps us on edge, and that's exactly what makes him so terrifying. But how did a regal peacock become one of the most ruthless villains we've seen in animated cinema? And what can we learn from his character to create our own unforgettable, terrifyingly evil and genocidal villain? There's a reason Shen stands out, and it's not just because of those flashy feathers, though we will have our fair share of talking about them too. To understand the very reasons that turned Shen into such an evil villain and the horrifying war crimes he goes on to commit, it's important to get a true feeling about the world where all of this takes place. After the events in the first movie where Po defeated Tai Lung, there has been peace ever since. Po and the Furious Five have gotten close and spend their time training in the Jade Palace and defending nearby villages against occasional bandits and raiders. Life has been relatively calm until now, as there was evil brewing in Gongmen City. The city is a large metropolis located on the southern coast of China. It was once ruled by the Peacock family, who brought joy and prosperity to the city's inhabitants. However, after Shen, the single heir to the throne, was banished, the city was left under the protection of a council of kung fu warriors. This council was led by the legendary master Thundering Rhino. Fast forward 20 years, and Lord Shen returns to claim what he believes is rightfully his. With an army of ruthless wolves at his command, Shen swiftly seizes control of the city, and his forces are given free rein to terrorize the innocent citizens. But what really shakes the world is when Shen defeats and kills Master Thundering Rhino, the leader of the city's defenders. News of Shen's takeover and Rhino's death spread like wildfire across China, shocking everyone. But the thing is, Shen isn't known for his martial arts skills. In fact, compared to other characters in the film, he's at a disadvantage. So how the heck does this peacock manage to kill Master Thundering Rhino, son of legendary Flying Rhino and the slayer of the 10,000 serpents in the Valley of Woe? Well, he has something far more dangerous, far more lethal, a weapon that destroys Kung Fu. Yep, you heard that right.
I mean, how can Kung Fu stop something that stops Kung Fu?
As soon as the news reaches the Jade Palace, Shifu wastes no time. He sends Po and the Furious Five on a mission to Gongmen City to liberate it, defeat Lord Shen, and most importantly, save Kung Fu. All six immediately set off on what appears to be a long journey over the course of multiple days. Gongmen City is quite different from the calm, picturesque Valley of Peace we're familiar with from the first film. It's a chaotic metropolis with a sprawling infrastructure that feels overwhelming and disorienting. The calm and quaint valley is replaced by a city full of stacked buildings, endless alleyways, crowded streets, and so many signs.
Why aren't there so many signs?
Everything combines to make the city the perfect backdrop for the chaos about to unfold. Right after Po and the Five enter the city, they find themselves in a long chasing sequence and fighting dozens of wolves until they are outnumbered. The wolves capture them and haul them to the Tower of Sacred Fire, where Shen impatiently awaits Po. But why? It all lies in his prophecy. And speaking of prophecy, I think it's time we dive into Shen's origin. Why was he banished in the first place? And more intriguingly, what transformed him into the villain we know? As I mentioned earlier, Lord Shen is the only son of the noble Peacock family and their sole heir. The Peacock family ruled Gongmen City with grace, bringing light and color to the lives of their people. They even invented fireworks as a symbol of the joy and prosperity they provided to the city. That explains why the central royal tower of the city is named the Tower of Sacred Fire. But from a young age, Shen was different. He wasn't drawn to the beauty or the joy those fireworks represented. Instead, he became fascinated with the not-so-sacred aspects of this fire. He saw something in the flames that no one else did: power and destruction. And this obsession led him down a dangerous path. Worried by their son's rather peculiar interests, his parents consulted a soothsayer. She foretold that if Shen continued down this dark road, he would be defeated by a warrior of black and white. And how does Shen react to this prophecy? He goes in the complete opposite direction. In a desperate attempt to avoid his destiny, Shen tried to erase it. He commits genocide, ordering the slaughter of the entire panda population, hoping that by wiping out the supposed threat, he could change his fate. I mean, Shen, buddy, the prophecy literally told you not to follow this path of darkness. So what do? You double down on it with mass murder? Anyway, spoiler alert, he didn't get them all. There was one panda left, the same panda who'd go on to become the Dragon Warrior. Unsurprisingly, Shen's lust for power and violence didn't sit well with his parents. Yeah, like, who would have thought that the family who was known to bring peace and joy to their people would be horrified when their only son comes back having committed a literal genocide? They banished Shen from Gongmen City. But Shen wasn't one to accept defeat like that. This is the guy who wiped out an entire population just because of a prophecy that didn't sit well with him. So, being exiled, you can bet he was planning something even worse. In exile, his hatred only grew. He stewed in his anger, and that seed of vengeance blossomed into something far more sinister. Shen vowed to return, not just to reclaim his birthright, but to prove to his parents and the world that they were all wrong and that his power was absolute. For 20 years, Shen prepared. He plotted a return that would change the balance of power forever. And now, he's back. Gongmen City is under his control, and the world is about to see just how far Shen is willing to go to take what he believes is rightfully his. He's no longer a banished prince. He's become something much more dangerous. His ambition is driven by vengeance, and he's ready to destroy anything or anyone that stands in his way. And we all get to see that in the first scene we ever see of Shen. All aspects of Shen's personality are effectively depicted in almost every scene in which he appears. He's an evil and manipulative lunatic throughout the film, but I think it is reflected the best in the first scene, where we get to see Shen clearly. He walks up to the main gate of the tower in his steady and prideful gait, the click of his ornate iron talons echoing with every step. He takes down several armed guards in a single hit like it was nothing. He strikes open the door to enter the courtyard where Master Ox, Master Croc, and Master Rhino are training. And then in his arrogant and condescending tone, he commands the three to leave the palace.
Please leave my house.
Upon inquiring, he claims that Gongmen City is rightfully his, and he comes to take it. His insolence angers the Kung Fu masters, who come charging on him, and we get to see Shen in action for the first time. It becomes immediately clear that he's not like the other villains in the Kung Fu Panda series. His approach is different. He's dismissive, he taunts his opponents, and instead of relying purely on Kung Fu, he uses weapons. And when he's outmatched in combat, he reveals the main package.
It's a gift. Oh, it's your parting gift, in that it will part you.
But what is this package? What could Shen possibly have that surpassed Kung Fu in a movie that is based all around Kung Fu? It's a cannon. Shen had been working with the destructive power of fireworks, twisting their beauty into something lethal. He's created a weapon that annihilates anyone in its path. He aims it at Master Rhino and fires. And just like that, he finishes one master, and the other two silently surrender. Now, isn't that a sensational villain entrance? Okay, it was bad, I admit, but seriously, this scene serves as the perfect introduction to Shen, who is unlike any antagonist we've seen before in the Kung Fu Panda universe. He's calm, calculated, and doesn't rely on brute strength or kung fu skills alone. Instead, he uses fear, manipulation, and his army of wolves. Shen didn't need to fight the masters. He knew he was no match for their kung fu, but he engaged them anyway, just to mock them. And we soon realize that this villain doesn't only use power to dominate his opponents. There's more to him than just that. We can already tell that his actions in the courtyard go far beyond reclaiming a throne. They're about total domination, driven by something dark and consuming. Shen wants to conquer, and he's willing to annihilate anything that threatens his vision. His motives are dark, rooted in a need to demonstrate that his path of destruction is a strength, not a weakness. Banished by his family, rejected by his people, Shen turned his rage into something monstrous. In his mind, total destruction isn't cruelty, it's a means to prove himself. His fixation on his past fuels this madness, driving him to believe that the only way to secure his future is to crush every possible threat to it. And his barbaric urges aren't a side effect of his lust for power, they are central to his identity. Every brutal decision is shaped by his need to rewrite fate, even if it means leaving scorched earth behind. Shen doesn't just seek revenge, he's willing to commit atrocities on a scale that reveals a villain driven by an unstoppable, almost primal hunger for domination. And speaking of identity, it's the core theme of the movie, with Shen's journey paralleling Po's in a striking way. Both are searching for something that will give them peace.
How did I get here, Dad? Where did I come from? And who am I?
Shen is running from his past, gripped by fear of a prophecy he can't avoid. He's convinced that by erasing the threat and controlling the future, he can escape his fate. But no matter how hard he tries, his past is always there, keeping him from finding peace in the present. Shen is obsessed with control. He's convinced that if he dominates the future, it'll bring him satisfaction, but it's never enough. Even after conquering Gangmen City, he remains unfulfilled. No amount of destruction brings him the validation he seeks. Compare that with Po. He's also searching for who he is, but instead of running from his past, he's embracing it. Po's journey is about understanding where he comes from, while Shen is desperately trying to deny who he was. Both want peace, but their approaches couldn't be more different, and that's what ultimately shapes their destinies. Shen's desperate need to validate himself and his insatiable desire for more is perfectly reflected in the scene where he doesn't hesitate to destroy the Tower of Sacred Fire, which was his family's legacy.
China is my reward.
Then will you finally be satisfied?
Ironically, this was the very tower he once wanted to claim, believing it would give him the satisfaction of regaining what was rightfully his. But even after tearing it down, he's not satisfied. Shen doesn't stop there. He's willing to do anything to achieve his goal, even if it means turning on his own army. Nothing is sacred to Shen anymore.
Nothing stands in my way.
His thirst for domination has overtaken everything. And it's not hard for us to see that even with all this destruction, Shen will never realize that his desire for control, for validation, has no end. It's a bottomless pit, and he's trapped in it. Despite all his efforts to control his future, what he fears the most is the very destiny he's been running from. And that's what makes him so tragic. Shen's entire identity is tangled in his twisted belief that wiping out his enemies will make him invincible, that fear and terror can secure his place in history. But he's not just wiping out his enemies with destruction, he's got another power in his arsenal. Shen doesn't only use the physical power of his army and his weapon to win his battles, he's just as much a psychological villain too. In fact, the war between Po and Shen is just as much a battle of the mind as it is of fists and weapons. Shen knows how to get into Po's head, and he uses it to his advantage at every turn. Remember, Shen is an important part of Po's past, the past Po is so desperately trying to uncover. Po wants answers about where he came from, and Shen knows this. He uses that knowledge like a weapon. During the fight sequence in the weapon factory, Shen doesn't just aim to defeat Po physically, he goes straight for his mind.
Your parents didn't love you.
At this point, Po is already struggling. He's at his lowest mentally, uncertain of who he is or where he belongs, and Shen is at his peak, confident, powerful, and completely in control. By telling Po that he's unloved and abandoned, Shen tries to win the battle by crushing Po's spirit. Shen understands the weight of those words, and he knows they'll hit Po harder than any punch could. But this attack is more than psychological manipulation. It's a projection of Shen's own fears and insecurities. Shen was abandoned too, abandoned by his own family, and deep down, he carries that same pain. By telling Po that his parents didn't love him, Shen is really voicing his own deepest fear. He's terrified that he wasn't loved, that he was cast aside, and that his quest for power is all he has left. But the thing is, even Shen's own fear of being unloved wasn't entirely true. I want you to look at this scene from earlier when the soothsayer tells him that he's wrong. His parents did love him, and it was their heartbreak over sending him away that led to their early demise. Notice how, for a brief moment, Shen breaks.
The dead exist in the past.
His hardened exterior cracks, and just for a brief second, you can see him reflecting on the truth he's been avoiding. It's one of the few moments where Shen could have chosen a different path, but instead of facing this realization, he quickly shuts it down, pushing away the emotions and returning to his cold, calculated self. It's almost as if he has to keep going down this dark path to justify his need for vengeance. Changing now would mean admitting that everything he's done was for nothing, and that's a truth Shen can't accept. And this pattern of behavior is something we've seen before in him. When the prophecy about his downfall was first revealed, rather than reflecting on it, Shen responded with more horror to justify his darkness. The final opportunity for redemption comes near the end when Po destroys his armada and offers Shen a chance to let go of his past. By this point, Po has found peace with his own traumatic history. He understands that his past doesn't define him, and it's up to him to choose who he wants to be now. Po extends this lesson to Shen, giving him a chance to stop the cycle of destruction and find peace. This is Shen's ultimate moment of reckoning. Po gives him the chance to redeem himself and stop the cycle of destruction. But even then, Shen can't do it. He rejects the opportunity and makes one final desperate attempt to defeat Po. It's a tragic moment because Shen was too entrenched in his need for domination to ever fully accept the moments of redemption he had. In the end, it wasn't his circumstances that made him irredeemable. It was his own refusal to let go of his darkness. And just as the prophecy foretold, that's exactly what leads to his death. Despite all his efforts to escape his fate, his own actions inevitably bring about his downfall, both in metaphorical and literal terms. When he attacks Po for the final time, in the process, he accidentally cuts the ropes holding up his last remaining cannon, which falls and crushes him. And here's something interesting I want you all to think about. Remember how prophecy said Shen would be defeated by a warrior of black and white? And sure, Po fits the bill. He's a panda, a literal warrior of black and white, but have you noticed who else shares those same colors? Shen. Yeah, I know it's black, white, and red, but look at this shot from the montage earlier in the film. That is Shen. His blade is positioned down the center of his face, splitting him into black and white. This can't be a coincidence, right? As much as Po is the warrior of black and white, so is Shen. It's almost as if the prophecy was speaking to Shen's internal conflict, his own role in sealing his fate. I don't know about you, but I find this interpretation pretty fascinating. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now that we're on the topic of Shen's character design, let's take a moment to talk about it. Shen's character design is one of the most striking in Kung Fu Panda 2. Despite being a peacock, an animal typically associated with beauty, his design conveys menace and power. Shen wears razor-sharp metal talons, an intimidating feature that mirrors how real peafowl defend themselves. The clinking sound they make as he walks adds to his sinister presence. His fighting style is graceful yet deadly, inspired by the martial art Kai Li Fo, known for its fluid movements and agile footwork. His weaponry includes feather-shaped throwing knives and a flame-shaped blade, all tying into the film's fire motif. But the real standout is how he uses his train in combat, blocking and diverting attacks with it like a war fan. His white plumage also plays a key role. It not only makes him visually striking against the film's bold and striking backdrops, but also symbolizes mourning and death in Chinese culture, perfectly reflecting his dark nature. And Shen's red eyes in association with fire give him an almost demonic presence, especially in scenes set in the weapon factory. So how do you write a thoroughly evil and genocidal villain like Shen? Creating a character as compelling as him requires a balance of emotional depth, clear motivation, and layers of depth. Let me break it down for you. Deep down in every great evil villain is a deeply personal motive. Shen's entire journey is driven by a prophecy that foretells his defeat by a warrior of black and white. But Shen's thirst for vengeance is more than just about defeating an enemy. It's also driven by a desperate need for validation. When you're writing a villain, you need to tap into these deep emotions. Give them a reason for their quest for revenge that's personal and emotional, not just superficial. Shen's fear of being unloved and rejected by his parents adds layers to his character. He's not just angry, he's afraid, insecure, and desperate to prove himself. I know it may sound cliche, but it actually works. A villain's past needs to play a significant role in their motivations. In Shen's case, his fear of the prophecy and his belief that his parents didn't love him drove him down a dark path. And yet, despite all his efforts, his past continues to haunt him. The key here is to make the villain's inability to let go of the past one of their biggest flaws. Shen's past haunts him, and he's trapped by it, which leads him to make destructive choices. In writing your own villain, make sure their past is woven tightly into their present. Their refusal to let go or move on should be the very thing that defines them and leads them down their path of chaos. Shen's character is fascinating because of this exact reason. He believes that obliterating any possible threat to his power will finally give him the peace he craves. But what Shen really needs is to let go of his past. He needs to accept that his parents loved him and that his quest for validation is a path to emptiness. Yet, time and time again, he refuses this truth, choosing instead to double down on a genocidal path that turns him further into a ruthless force of chaos. Create this tension in your villain. Let them chase after something they believe will bring them peace or fulfillment while ignoring the true, more vulnerable solution. This adds complexity to the character, showing that their desire for control and vengeance is not only destructive to others, but ultimately hollow, showing them as a figure trapped by their own monstrous choices. One of Shen's most effective traits as a villain is his ability to attack his opponent psychologically. He isn't just about brute force or flashy weapons, he knows how to get into the heads of his opponents. This psychological depth makes him infinitely more terrifying because his threat goes beyond physical harm. It's the mental and emotional torment he inflicts, twisting his enemies' beliefs and breaking their spirits. When creating your own villain, give them this menacing mental edge, making them not just a physical opponent, but a shadow in the minds of their enemies. This psychological dimension adds an unsettling, deeper layer, showing that the true horror of the villain lies as much in their mind games as in their actions. The most compelling evil villains are those who create their own downfall, and Shen exemplifies this perfectly. Instead of changing his course or reflecting on his actions, it's his own choices that lead him straight to his demise. One of the key elements that makes Shen's character so impactful is that he's given multiple opportunities to redeem himself. When the soothsayer reveals that his parents did love him, and when Po offers him a chance to let go of his past, Shen is faced with moments where he could choose a different path. But each time, he rejects redemption. This matters significantly when you write a villain who's through and through evil. Give them chances to redeem themselves. These moments create tension because they highlight that redemption is possible, but ultimately, your villain should refuse to take it. This makes their downfall even more tragic and satisfying. By following these steps, you can create a villain who's just as ruthlessly motivated and terrifyingly evil as Shen. And don't forget, a well-written villain needs more than depth only in their actions and design. They need an unsettling psychological layer that pushes them to commit acts of unimaginable horror. If you found this breakdown of Shen interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts on what makes a truly terrifying villain.